Today's episode is sponsored by Ellie, ELLII.
Ellie is one of the world's leading content libraries for English language teachers, with thousands of ready-made lessons and flashcards and hundreds of videos that you can use to complement your own curriculum or use as your main source of materials.
Ellie is run by a team of former English teachers, dedicated to creating content that engages your language learners.
If you're an independent teacher or paying for your materials out of pocket, we invite you to use our podcast's exclusive discount code Think-Aloud to save 15% off your first membership term. That's THINKALOUD.
And if you're an administrator looking to buy for your whole program, just reach out to the fine folks at Ellie to inquire about a 2-month free trial to test it out for your organization. And don't forget to mention who sent you, your friends at the Teacher Think Aloud podcast.
Head to ellie.com today. That's ELLII.com. Hello, and welcome to the Teacher Think Aloud podcast, a podcast for reflective practice for teachers of English around the world. I'm your co-host, Anna.
And I'm Shé.
Hi, Shé.
Hi, Anna.
Oh my gosh, this reminds me. I was listening back to some of our early episodes recently, and I can't get over our cheesy openers.
Yes, so cheesy. I think my favorite one was, Anna? Oh, good, you're here. We scheduled that meeting to record. She's there. The mics are hot. Like, go on, little one.
We're definitely a bit more business-like now, aren't we? Less dilly-dallying.
I mean, we're kind of dilly-dallying right now.
Well, hey, you have to start somewhere, right?
That's right. And actually, Anna, that is a wonderful segue into our conversation for today, which is this idea of starting somewhere.
Nice segue there, Shé. Today we're going to look at how English language teachers can integrate elements of sustainability into their practice. Greening ELT, you might say.
And there's no better person to join us for our conversation than the one and only Harry Waters.
Let's meet him.
Hello, my name is Harry Waters. Could even call me Harry Alexander John Waters if you wanted to add my middle names. My pronouns are he, him, his. I do lots of things. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher trainer. I'm a materials writer. I'm a content creator. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I am activist. And at the moment, I'm sweaty.
That was probably the best intro we've ever had.
I love it.
All encompassing.
Yeah, I've said on several episodes, I'm sweating so much. I'm so excited. Yes. I'm so sweaty. I regularly give people that information. So you're in good company, Harry. Thanks for sharing that. So you may have noticed that in our episodes, we like to throw a little bit of an icebreaker question to our guests that's adjacent to the topic that we're discussing. So my question for you today is, what was your favorite outdoor activity as a kid? And do you still do it?
Oh, yeah, I do actually. My favorite outdoor activity as a kid was probably, I'm going to say this first in English and then I'll translate it into American for you. It was playing football or playing soccer, as you might say. I was outside all the time as a kid. Mobile phones hadn't been invented and PlayStation hadn't even come out yet. As a child, I was constantly out in the park, but yeah, I would play football with my best mate Brett every night after school, night after night. Like they say, about after 10,000 hours of something, you become an expert. If you're quite rubbish at football, you won't become an expert even after 10,000 hours, because I must have played for so long. And I do still do it, except now it's not with my best friend Brett because he doesn't live in Spain. It is with my daughter. We go out and play most days. At the moment, it's difficult because it's 40 degrees. If I translate that into American, it's about 108, I believe. So that's not great for running around. I also love walking, litter picking. I wasn't a huge fan of litter picking as a child because it was usually used as a punishment, but I've grown to love it.
Amazing. And I know Ali, your daughter, does litter picking for fun by choice, right? She's doing a lot of activism in that space.
She is indeed. Recently completed her 1 million litter pick, galvanized people from across the globe to collect litter. And in fact, while we were in Edinburgh, when I met Shé, she picked up the millionth piece of litter.
It's amazing. And
Wow.
she and he together did the closing keynote at IATEFL in Edinburgh this year. It
Oh,
was really lovely.
lovely. That's
We did.
fantastic. Thank you. I want to refer back to you translating things to American so many times. I just think it's hilarious that everyone is so aware of that difference.
There's no right or wrong way about saying it. It's just
Mhm.
two different ways of saying it.
Yeah.
This
Mhm.
argument I forever hear, no, it's football, no, it's soccer. Doesn't
Mm.
matter. As long as we understand each other, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, that's true. So, speaking of heat waves and litter picking, activism more broadly, could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to merge environmental activism with English language teaching?
Okay, there's a long and a short version of this. The long one
Mm.
starts when I was about 4. My first ever protest was against library fees in my hometown. I was about 4 then. I've been involved in social justice ever since. I became an English teacher because I wanted to travel. I started in Argentina. I went to Brazil, to Vietnam, to China. And while I was traveling, I was acutely aware of, I think we just about started calling it climate change, but it was still often referred to as global warming. The Bush administration had started to turn it into climate change because that sounded less scary. But I became acutely aware of that, seeing it affecting different areas. And it reminded me of when I was about 7, back in 1991. Like from one day to the next, there was a big influx of Bangladeshi students in my school. And it was because of a huge cyclone that had happened and they'd all been displaced because of climate. I stopped and I thought, oh, I remember that. And it had a really big impact on me then. And I carried it into my teaching. So I'd make sure that in all of my lessons, I was trying to focus on the climate crisis, what could be done, what we could do as individuals, what we could be hoping to do on a bigger scale. And then in 2017, I realized the power of youth activism when groups work together. So my daughter had been born in 2013. I've been in hospital. I've been sick for a while. So all of these things had come into my head that I needed to do more. I needed to do more. I wasn't doing enough. 2017 or 2018, I'd been talking about the climate crisis with my students for about a year and a half with my 5th graders. And it was World Earth Day. The school, in its infinite wisdom, decided to print out a whole load of pictures that the kids could color in that said, help the earth. They printed out about 1,500 of these things for the kids to color in. And my 5th grade students were indignant. They were like, this is ridiculous. How can they do this? And I saw that anger and I saw that passion in them. And we got together and we started like a letter writing campaign to make sure that every classroom had recycling bins. That first we just made them ourselves and we went round and we gave them to them. And also to get solar panels installed in the school. And it worked. And I saw that it worked. And I was like, hang on a minute. If I can do this with 90 students, imagine what would happen if I could get the whole world working on this. So hopefully we'll have solar panels on every school when I take over the entire world. And that was about it, really. That's how I got there. Because, there wasn't enough. Whenever you open an English textbook, about 5 to 8 years ago, there was that one unit on the environment, and it was the typical, the ice caps are melting, the polar bears are dying. Try telling a 15-year-old Spanish kid that's important. Not important to 90% of the population, who cares about the polar bears? Side note, I care about the polar bears. I think they're lovely. And I decided that I needed to make sure there was climate crisis education for every single unit of the book. Because as Jane Goodall says, and I'm paraphrasing here, every day we have an impact on the planet and it's up to us what kind of impact we make. So literally everything we learn has a connection to the environment, to the climate crisis, or to social justice in general. That's the long story. Short, but not short. Still quite long.
It's lovely. Yeah.
Great.
And do you mind just telling us a little bit more about what Renewable English is, what it is that you do with Renewable English?
Excellent question. So it started out with, I was trying to get into as many classrooms as possible to try and get environmental education into as many classrooms as possible. And a really good way of doing that is through English language teaching, where you can use English language teaching as the tool, and you can use sustainability, as some people like to call it, but environmental sustainability, the environment, as like a means to do, because as I say, it can be with every single unit in the book. And I did it with lots of people across the world, lots of classrooms and so on. And then I realized I wanted to do a bit more. So I started going towards teachers and doing teacher training to try and, if you go into a classroom, you're teaching 30 kids. If you teach a teacher, then they've got all of their different classes. And then it evolved a little bit more. It went from turning every class into a class that had the environment. Then I talked a lot about the Sustainable Development Goals. But then I finally realized that what I actually wanted to do was more than just talk about the environment, but it was more about youth empowerment and showing young people what can happen when they use their voice and how they can use their voice, and to not be afraid of using their voice because it's the best tool they've got for change. And it started out as trying to get into as many classrooms as possible and help students understand the climate crisis. And it's developed into something more of helping students be their best selves to have an impact on the world, but in a positive way and not just go out and buy fast fashion way.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think I love that youth empowerment, and the beginning of your journey really started with that kind of student driven or student voiced disappointment with the way that things were being done. And I'm getting notes of project-based learning in there.
Lots of projects.
Yeah. Thinking about project-based learning always makes me think about augmenting student agency and letting student choice and student voice really drive instruction and activity in the classroom. So let's talk a little bit about the role that student agency plays in the lessons that you create and share with teachers, and then also in your own teaching. And then maybe you could share with us a student-led initiative that surprised you.
Agency is everything. It's literally everything. Now, whether we're teaching about the climate crisis or anything in general, students learn more when they have that agency, and it's not just us trying to spoon feed facts into their brain, because when we spoon feed, basically the only thing the students learn about is the shape of the spoon. They don't learn about what's on it. And so agency is everything. You know, we're not just teaching nouns and verbs. We're helping students find their voice in a noisy world. When they realize that they can talk about climate change, they begin to realize they can do something about it. And I try and help them understand that. Now, this is not my quote, but I really love it. It's from a gentleman I know. He says, it's not about being the best in the world, but the best for the world. When students have agency, the classroom becomes like, it's a rehearsal space for real life change. You know, even if they're 12 and their biggest worry is losing at FIFA or Fortnite, they can still be the people that lead a recycling campaign, or maybe design a greener lunch menu, or start a meat-free Monday campaign or something like that. And the second part of the question there, you mentioned a student-led initiative that surprised me. Now, I'm going to fight with you a little bit on this one. And I'm going to change the adjective because I'm going to push back on that word surprised, because for me, when it comes to young people who are creative and honest and fearless, nothing should surprise us. Be amazed, be blown away, be gobsmacked, but never be surprised. Yeah, exactly. Delighted, wondered. Yeah, all of these amazing things. There have been quite a few. The one I mentioned, my fifth graders who started making the recycling bins, and they didn't wait for permission. They just did it. They made it out of cardboard boxes and then campaigned for solar panels. There's a school I work with in India. They started something called a pen hospital back in 2021, where if a pen was broken, they would take it and take the parts out of it and make other pens for people who perhaps couldn't afford pens, or just to keep them alive, to keep them going. And it's still going strong today. In Turkey, some students I worked with designed plant-based menus that have been implemented in their campaigns. But these are just like the success stories. These are all the good things that happen, because for every one campaign that really takes off, there are 50 that completely fail. And that's one of those things that we need to learn as humans, that we're going to fail. It was Edison, wasn't it, that mentioned, you've got to fail 10,000 times or something along those lines. It's one of you can probably remember it.
No, I can't, but
I remember
10,000 hours, 10,000 failures. There have to be failures.
Exactly, and they fall flat a lot. So we talked about my daughter before, and she tried to get a campaign started at a school, and it never got traction. None of the school leadership took it on board. There was nothing. So she just wanted to go bigger, and instead of doing it at school, she was like, "Do you know what? I'm going to go international." And so at the end of the day, now people, 35 different countries have picked up over 1.2 million pieces of plastic litter in under 2 years. Not surprised exactly, but definitely constantly in awe about these things. And the fact is that Failure is part of it. I've failed so many times. Got to keep trying.
Yeah, that's right. I remember, Harry, you mentioned to me in our conversation at IATEFL that the English language classroom is a really great laboratory, or I guess in English, you would say a laboratory, yes, for
Oh, yes.
this idea that the English language classroom is really just this really fertile ground for talking about these things. And so what comes to mind when you say 10,000 failures is that's yet another piece of critical thinking, something that we need to teach our students, right? This idea that failure is, it's normal. We're going to see it as we're struggling to learn a new language, and whatever initiatives that we're trying to green the world, we're going to experience these moments of what feel like failure, but I think are just opportunities for learning if we're going to be optimistic about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Growth mindset. It's not about winning and losing. It's about winning and learning. They're real.
I'm going to be thinking about that spoon metaphor for a while, that when we spoon feed, students learn about the shape of the spoon. Nothing else. So how can we get our students to think about what's on the spoon or the issues, I suppose? Right. It's such a clear call to shift from delivering information to creating space for exploration.
Totally. And that shift is all about agency, right? Letting students decide what matters to them and how they want to respond. We have to let go a little if we want them to take ownership.
Right. That flexibility opens up room for creativity and real-world problem solving. What really stood out to me in Harry's examples is that his students didn't wait for permission. I love that. They saw a problem and they acted. What if we made that part of our classroom routine?
Right. Power to them. Maybe What Bugs You board, where students post things they want to change in their community or school.
Exactly. And maybe once a month, you give them a chance to pitch a solution and try it out. That kind of practice builds their change maker muscles, I'm going to call them. This idea of observing, reflecting, and acting.
And, failing sometimes, right? That's real learning. It gives us a chance to model resilience, iteration, and reflection, skills that go far beyond the classroom.
And we could even build a routine of reflection around that. What worked? What didn't? What will we do differently next time?
Because really, environmental activism and language learning have a lot in common, right? They both ask students to take risks, communicate, and try again. And we've seen how easily environmental themes get treated as one-off activities, really. Earth Day posters, a single unit in a book, and the like.
But Harry's students show us that kids can do more. When we treat sustainability as part of ongoing student-driven inquiry, not just a topic, but a context, it becomes something that they live, not just learn. And this self-direction and agency that we're talking about, it just aligns so well with communicative language teaching, right?
Yeah.
Projects like the ones that Harry highlights promote real-world communication, collaboration, and metacognitive skills.
Yeah, that's right. And you were saying that English language teaching, English language learning is really fertile ground for these kinds of conversations. I wanted to ask you how you balance, or maybe, how that pairing flourishes, teaching English with climate awareness, and especially thinking of mixed age or mixed proficiency classrooms. When you're speaking to teachers that you're working with, what are some tips that you might give them for balancing English language learning or merging English language learning with climate awareness?
Oh, so many tips, so many things. You don't really need to change your lessons all that much, to be honest. You mentioned critical thinking before. It can be handed over to the students, even just the last 5 minutes of a lesson. If you've just been learning about fashion, if you've just been learning about sport, if you've just been learning about technology, you can just ask the students, how does this affect the planet? In what ways do you think this could affect the planet? Which of the sustainable development goals could this be connected to? So you don't have to turn the whole world upside down. And the wonderful thing about English language teaching, or English as a second language, English as a foreign language, English as an additional language, it is something that is in, I really hate saying this phrase, but it's in every corner of the globe. It's a globe, so there aren't any corners, but it's everywhere. And it isn't about cramming in these scary facts and this amount of CO2, although it is good for learning big numbers. But it's like using language to explore big ideas in small, manageable ways. For your lower levels, just simple vocabulary like reuse or the concept of to throw something away. Rather than just talking about throwing something away, talk about what happens when you throw something away. Are you actually throwing it away, or is it just going to landfill somewhere? And yeah, for different age groups as well. When the age groups are mixed in a classroom, it can be trickier, obviously, but it's finding that common ground, finding something like litter picking, for example, is a really good way of joining generations as well. But when we look at sort of higher levels and that sort of thing, and mixed ability even within teenage levels, unpacking stuff like fast fashion and connecting it to eco-anxiety and big climate emotions. I think the real key is just to build the language in around student interest and use sustainability as the context, not the topic. So rather than it always being today's lesson is about the environment, no, today's lesson is about the hats and how cool hats are, but also how hats have an impact on the environment, because this wool hat definitely has an impact on the environment because it was mass produced, but it was bought secondhand. And you can then connect it to secondhand and so on. Yeah, sometimes we're going to talk about litter. Sometimes we're going to talk about whether the planet can survive influencer culture, which it absolutely can't. But we can do it all in English. I don't know if I gave you any tips in there, though.
You did, yeah. Well, for sure. For me, a takeaway is that you don't want to start with scary facts about, how we're measuring our carbon footprint and like what damage we're doing, starting with numbers. I think, at least for me, it always feels like a deterrent. I'm not a math whiz, so my brain kind of shuts down and I'm like, I can't process this. And I think a lot of people are similar. But this idea of giving people a space to explore, these different issues and framing it that way, we're not only teaching them about these concepts and asking them to think about them more critically, but we're giving them the tools through language that they can continue to engage on their own. And I think that's key in this building agency idea that we mentioned earlier.
100%.
Harry, I've heard you use the word glocal before. The idea is thinking globally, acting locally. So how can teachers embrace this idea of glocal teaching in their everyday classroom work?
So it's very simple. This one is, as I mentioned before with the polar bears, students aren't going to be interested in these huge issues because they can't really do anything about them. You can't give somebody agency over something so massive as reducing the amount of CO2 in the environment because you can't. So start small and start where you are. Don't just start where you are or the region, start exactly where you are. Start in your classroom. Look at the waste in your classroom. Look at the amount of single-use plastic in your classroom. Look at the different foods that you're eating at break time in your classroom. Then maybe look at water shortages in your region. Look at why there aren't refillable water fountains in your school. Why do there have vending machines selling bottles of water and not a simple tap where you can drink it? And then from that, you can connect it to the bigger picture. You can connect that water to a global water crisis. You can connect the waste in school to the obscene plastic production and plastic pollution that exists in the world. You can use the Sustainable Development Goals to do that. If you're studying the conditionals, when we talk about the second conditional, it's always, if I had $1 million, I would probably not be able to do very much anymore because $1 million isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, right.
Why not change that to say, if our school planted 1,000 trees, or if our school collected 1 million pieces of litter, it's the same grammar, but it's more relevance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just starts from a very recognizable, familiar place for students. It doesn't have to be, like you're saying, it doesn't have to be the big issue. It can be the issue that is connected to the rest of this global climate crisis, or just to climate more broadly, awareness of nature, everything that comes with that big scary term, climate change. I think you've given a lot of good ideas for starting places here, like just giving that idea, start with the second conditional. How can you just make a small tweak to your lesson plan of how you're going to introduce that?
This might be a great easy in kind of prompt. Pick a grammar point you're already working on this week. How could you give it a real world, locally grounded twist that connects to the wider world?
Yeah, I appreciate that Harry highlighted that it doesn't have to be a big move for it to be
Mm.
effective.
Mm-hmm.
Every lesson can end with a quick, how does this topic connect to the environment?
Absolutely. And this is a fantastic way to instill environmental awareness and just, I think, a stronger connection to greater society for students. Let's see what other tips and tricks Harry's got for us.
So I want to invite you, if you have any other tips, one thing a teacher could do this week or today to green their classrooms, what is something that you would invite teachers to do?
Well, I think the first thing, and this is a very easy one, I think Anna's going to really like this one, is buy a plant. Get a plant in your classroom and literally green your classroom. So that's a great start because it brings nature into the classroom. It's the first thing I always talk about with teachers. The first step is to get nature where students can see it. Let them be able to see nature. So bringing a plant in, giving it a name, and getting students to measure it, to see how it's going to learn how to take care of it, to love it. It's a really great first step. It is, in fact, the first unit in my very own book, which I haven't even mentioned. Look how good I am.
It's a great,
That's the second
great
thing.
segue, Harry.
Buy a plant, and then buy my book, Activism, the Green Mindset, which has 30 different projects and lessons which can help take your students from planet zero to climate hero.
Wow.
There you go. That's not well practiced, is it?
Seems like it's the first time you said it.
Definitely.
Brilliant.
Top of my head there. It's because I didn't have a hat on keeping it in.
Right.
Other than that, choose a thing and do it properly. So do like one thing. So maybe start a campaign for Meat Free Mondays, swap out your flashcards for digital ones and tell your students that you're doing it. Set up an eco challenge in the classroom, something like, let's see if we can all use refillable bottles by the end of the week. 5-minute discussion at the end of class on how what you've talked about affects the planet, no matter what you've talked about. The thing is, we're not going to fix climate change in 45 minutes. We're not going to change it with one thing, but what we can do, we can plant that seed and it can hopefully grow into environmentalism.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Nice little pun.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm just thinking, like back in grade school, what were my teachers doing to raise awareness around at the time, like global warming, right? I'm just thinking, like, maybe a recycling bin in our classroom. But if we didn't talk about how to properly dispose of recyclables, which is, a really important piece of the process. So I think that there are these sort of built-in opportunities that teachers can either choose to ignore or leverage to create more awareness around these topics. I do believe that those
100%.
little things make a difference.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll encourage the kid to go home and say, hey, mom, hey, dad, why don't we have a recycling bin? Or what, we're using this wrong. We're doing this wrong, right? So like creating
Yeah.
little activists is possible with just a little bit of effort.
Yeah, that idea of that they can affect their sphere of influence. And something like recycling is a great way to start that, because recycling isn't the answer. We all know it isn't the answer, because recycling isn't done properly, not by the people, but by the evil overlords.
Right.
Having that awareness of what we are using and, hey, maybe I shouldn't be even buying this in the first place, and paying attention to our recycling. It wasn't until lockdown during COVID that I really realized quite how much rubbish we were accumulating, because for the maths activities that I would do with my 6-year-old daughter at the time, we would audit what was in our recycling bin. And it was like, we've got 3 items of glass. Glass is great. Glass is infinitely recyclable. We can use it again and again. We've got some paper, not very much. And then the plastic, it was just like, wow. And like half of this plastic isn't even recyclable. And the plastic that is recyclable, I mean, if it's actually being recycled or not, or what it's being recycled for, sometimes it's going to be recycled into like a carpet or into a shirt, which then goes into the washing machine. And then the microfibers go off into the water anyway. And it kind of made me think, so if you're doing recycling properly, what you're really doing is ending up to not recycle, because you're looking at it and thinking, this is so much stuff, and it's important to recycle and be aware of our recycling and to do it properly, but not necessarily for the recycle factor, more for the awareness of what we're doing, and to raise that awareness in ourselves, in our students, and to kind of lead it to be a thing that we don't have to do, because we're hopefully not consuming nearly as much.
Yeah, that's a great point. Harry, since you brought up the evil overlords, I'm wondering, there are a lot of people who say that their individual efforts when it comes to supporting the environment don't make a difference because those people who are in power are the ones doing the real damage. So I wonder just if you have any advice for how teachers may respond to students or even colleagues who are reticent to do their part because they think it makes no difference. Like, how do we deal with that mentality?
I think for me, that the biggest one there, and a lot of people say it to me, you're not going to change the world. And you know what I say to them? I say, maybe I'm not going to change the world, but I'm not going to let the world change me. Maybe at the end of the day, when I'm 107 and I've lived a long and fruitful life, I don't want to be there on my deathbed thinking I could have done more. I don't want my daughter to come up to me, potentially grandchildren, to say to me, what did you do about this? And I want to say, I did everything I could. Did I succeed? Well, I don't know. Maybe I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be someone who said, yeah, I recycled a few times and then I realized it wasn't really having much of an impact. So I went out and just carried on buying endless amounts of stuff and doing loads of things that I knew weren't great. Yeah, I think for me, that's the key, that I may not change the world, but I'm definitely not going to let the world change me, and I'm not going to stop trying.
And I think
That's a nice
all,
way to end the conversation.
That's all we can really hope and do. And it does make a difference, regardless of how large or small the impact is, that impact means something. So thank you for that. Yeah. I appreciate those words.
Exactly. And if we did all stand up and fight against it, then we would be able to take down the evil overlords. But we do need to get everybody together to do it, and people not to say, no, but we can't do it. Yeah, we can. We definitely can.
Mm-hmm. And especially if we get the youth involved, that's really where you make a difference, right? So as teachers, we have actually a great platform to empower our youth to make a larger difference than we can. So
100%. Absolutely. Because going through time, they are going to have more struggles. But as long as they're aware of what's coming, then hopefully with working together intergenerationally, we can do something that has a more positive impact on the planet. Fingers crossed.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed, especially when we know where the real power lies. But Harry's reminder is powerful. We may not change the world alone, but we can refuse to let the world change our values.
Absolutely. I really appreciate how Harry doesn't sugarcoat the limits of individual action, but he also doesn't let us off the hook.
The mindset shift. We may not fix everything, but we can teach our students that their choices and voices matter.
And in that sense, language classrooms really are perfect spaces for rehearsing real change.
I'm walking away from this conversation thinking, what's one small shift I can make this week? Not just to talk about sustainability, but to model it.
Same. Maybe it's letting students co-create an eco-challenge. Maybe it's just asking, how does today's topic connect to the world around us? Right? It can be that simple.
Right. Whatever it is, start small. But start, right? And then grow, like the plant you bring into your classroom.
Listeners, we'll link Harry's activities for a green mindset in the show notes. It's packed with project ideas that you can adapt right away.
And of course, we want to get you reflecting on your own practice. What's one shift you'll try this week to make your classroom just a little greener, a little more student-centered, and a little more connected to the world we share?
If you found this episode helpful or inspiring, please share it with a friend or colleague, or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
It means so much to us.
Yes.
And if you're feeling generous, you can even support the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thinkaloudpod.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. Until next time, friends, happy teaching.
And happy reflecting.